Adam was introduced to drugs in school in grade 8 and had a psychotic break just a couple years later. Was taken to the hospital under police guard for 3 days and examined by a psychiatrist, and we were told that he wasn't mentally ill. But we just spent the next 10, 15 years trying to, figure out what was wrong, what was happening with him, and altogether probably 20 years trying to get services for him. He was very artistic and creative and cute and funny, so smart. I have 3 children, and I think he's the smartest of them all. And he was the oldest of 3. He's got a younger brother and sister and nieces, and he had a whole family that cared about him. A judge forced the ministry to take him into foster care to protect his family from him because he was threatening. And when he would be in a darker period, he would be kind of threatening and scary. And because he was in foster care, they treated us as if we were no longer his family, and they wouldn't give us any information on what was happening to him. So he aged out of foster care, basically onto the street. We had him on the list for BC Housing. We thought we had him on the list for about 8 or 9 years. But after he passed, I called them to find out why, he was still unhoused when he passed. And they looked at his record and said, well, he had been removed from the list at least 3 times by BC Housing and just spent a good 15, 20 years just being ping-ponged back and forth in the system looking for services. The services, they just found they're very siloed. One agency doesn't speak to another agency. This agency thinks another one is providing that service and they're not. One occasion in the winter, he made himself a small fire on top of a bucket to warm himself. And the police tracked him down. They actually tried me at 2 in the morning. Have you seen Adam? They tracked him down and they charged him with arson. And they confiscated his jacket and his shoes for evidence in this charge, and then sent him out into the snow in sock feet and a t-shirt. We know that there's a lack of housing and there's a lack of medical care, right? That's the bottom line. The closest we ever saw to him being stabilized was if he broke the law and he ended up in jail on the medical ward. And there he'd have a roof, he'd have a bed to sleep in, he'd have food, he'd have the food he needed to take his medication with, he'd have access to a doctor, and he'd have medication. And he'd be in jail for 3 or 4 months, become stabilized, and then released directly back out onto the street without any housing. Adam was 37 when he passed, and we're trying to get help for him. And I've got this number in my head of 40. 40 is the average life expectancy for an unhoused person with bipolar disorder. It just feels like you're working against this clock to try to get him off the street. And we know he's using these drugs because he just can't handle being there. And so it's not a total surprise when you get a call from the hospital. There needs to be some kind of central organization to all these different agencies. At one point, we've screamed and yelled our way all the way up to the mayor of Victoria, and she's referred us to this coalition, the Greater Victoria Coalition, and you think you've reached the organization that's going to help you because it should be coming under their umbrella. And the sum total of the advice we got was hang in there. Yeah, there needs to be a genuine central organization to all these different entities that are receiving funds to help people that are unhoused and unwell. And there needs to be some accountability. I think there's a great deal of money going into the system, much more money than needs to be there. It just needs to be used effectively.